Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel Watercolor Impressions. I saw an Instagram post from a friend last Friday. It was a moody winter evening and it has nice contrast to it, so I thought I would do a painting of it. Before we get on to it, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. So in any watercolors, you start with a light wash. So I started with the sky with Cobalt Blue. And you could see the drawing is pretty simple. I changed a lot of things in my drawing because whenever I look for references, I don't paint exactly as it is. I put my own spin on it. And as a painter, you have to tell a story and you don't have to be accurate of your references or what's in front of you. Unless you capture the mood and unless you capture the values right, then your painting will look amazing. You could see I did flip the canvas here and there because I want to create this gradient from top to bottom. So I want to have like a darker pigment at the bottom, and as it goes up, I want to have a gradient, a lighter gradient. For the bottom, I used French Ultramarine blue and a little bit of Cerulean blue in it because that gives a lot of color variations in our cool colors. So before it dries out, this is a beautiful thing about watercolor is like if you put any kind of pigment, it kind of gives this foggy, distant buildings right there. Even though it looks darker now, watercolor tends to get lighter as it dries out. And I'm taking the midground now. So for the midground, I want to do the same thing. That I want to connect that pigment which was settling at the bottom. And I'm going to introduce a little bit of buildings there. And you could see I also used tissue paper to take some of the paintings here and there, just to show a little bit of atmosphere and a little bit of lighting coming through it. And I also left quite a lot of white bits here and there because it was snowing that winter, it was snowing that evening, and there's a lot of snow deposits at the top of the building, so I just want to leave it as it is. And at the end we will add some colors, or we can have some lights and whatever we wanted. And I'm also making sure that leave some eyelets here and there for lights as well. And I'm trying to connect all the shapes together. So there is, like you can see, there is nothing unconnected in my painting now because I'm connecting all my shapes. And I'm also trying to rush it so that I don't want that pigment that's settling at the bottom to be, drying there, because sometimes it might leave some ugly marks in our painting. So, and being said that, when I connect these shapes with the pigment which is settling there, I try to have some color variations. But as an artist, you can also put whatever colors you want, and whenever something looks darker, I put a white paint on it so that the value kind of matches here and there. And I'm also taking that midground building and I'm going to connect it to the foreground building as well. And you could see for that midground building, I'm using raw amber. If you use raw amber just from your pans or just from your tube, it might look super dark. Add some white paint in it. So that will give a little bit of color variations and it looks lighter. And you can also see I put some water at the screen left because there's going to be a lot of lights there. And there was two tall buildings which is on the right hand side, and this also acts as a really good stand-in for our sky. So I added that building even though it looked white in my reference, but I did some color variations here and there. But I'm trying to keep this whole mood as cool, warm colors, cool colors. But as it comes to the foreground, I'm going to be introducing a lot of warm colors, so it kind of creates a contrast between warm and cool. I'm focusing on the foreground building. For that, I'm using Cerulean Blue and a little bit of Cobalt Blue, and sometimes I use white paint in it. And for the buildings at the screen left, I'm using French Ultramarine Blue. So it's the same process. I'm going to I will do the same thing as it is. I'm not going to lie. When I started this painting, when I was doing it, I wasn't sure what I'm doing. Most of the painting, I feel that way. I do painting, I don't know what I'm doing, but at the end, it works. That's a faith I have in whenever I paint. So as an artist, you should have that faith that something out of this will come magical, or something out of this will come really good in our painting. Being said that, not every painting going to look amazing. Some paintings might look good, some paintings not work that well. One of my favorite artists always says that don't ever think that you can't paint. Think that if your painting worked or it didn't, that's it. and there is no bad painting at all. So that's the mode I usually have whenever I paint, because even if it's a bad painting, I learned something from it. I think as a study and stuff, it's amazing painting. And as you can see, I'm also putting some marks, some confidence strokes here and there. It's kind of like act as a mid-tone. For that, I'm using French Ultramarine Blue for it. But I'm trying to keep all the colors as cool as possible, but in the foreground we'll be introducing a lot of warm colors. As I said, you see I used burnt amber and raw amber in the foreground, and I'm also making sure to have some darker value in the foreground, because that will create depth in our painting as well. So as it comes down, I'm going to be introducing a little bit of darker value to create some gradient as well. For this, I'm using a darker pigment of burnt amber, and I'll mix a little bit of Payne's gray in my burnt amber or amber, or a little bit of cadmium orange in it too, to get some warmness in our wash. Before it dries out, I'm also introducing a darker pigment. So some people paint different ways, because some people paint the light wash first, then they introduce mid-tone, then they introduce darker tones. But as you get experienced, you tend to know what to do and what exactly to do. As a beginner, I don't highly recommend trying this painting, because this might be quite challenging and it might be quite frustrating for beginners. But if you want and try to use it as a study, then making it pretty. You could see this is what I was talking about. I introduced a lot of warmer colors in the foreground, because that gives a little bit of contrast in our painting as well. And I'm introducing a lot of darker parts at the top. This is just to see where the details are. It's not like sometimes I put the details there just to see what's there, and I might change it at the end by using white paint, or I can put some colors on it and change it. So the white bits I left, I want to create a snow effect on top of it, so I used Cobalt Blue and a little bit of white paint in it, or else you can also use a little bit of Cobalt Blue and a little bit of Winsor violet in it. That also gives a really good colors for snow as well. So I jumped onto the building on the left, screen left. So that one I don't want to read as much as the foreground. That I'll keep as simple as possible. Whenever you do a painting, focus on one area and the rest keep it simple and leave as a mere mark. So the whole focus in our painting is the foreground building, and there's going to be a lot of lights reflecting on the ground, and that's going to look really beautiful once it's done. And the rest, it's kind of like a shape which supports our painting. Whenever you paint, think about this in the back of your mind, because when I've started painting, I started focusing on the background, then the rest of my painting, it ended up the background looking good, and the rest of the painting looked really weak. But as I painted more, then I came to realizing that you have to focus more on the focal point. The rest you can keep it really simple, because when a viewer sees your painting, the focus, the where you have more contrast, the people will look at that area than focusing the rest of the area. If you're a right-hand painter, it's better to start from left to right, because so that you don't put your hand marks. Whenever you press your hands on the painting, it might get some paint on your hand, and it will just rub it on your painting as well. I tend to do that mistake, but even it's fine. It's gonna give some marks in your painting as well. So it looked really weak. I don't know what's happening in my foreground on the left, so at the top, at the bottom. So I just want to see, put some colors. I want to see like where everything sits, and I'll go from there. But this area, I'm going to make it as dark as possible, because I want to bring this to forward as possible. There is also this big dark building in my reference, so I'm going to add that as well. And I'm going to treat this as a single flat shape, but at the end, once you put the lights, everything will make sense, and it's going to act as a lead-in than anything else in our painting. For the darker things, I don't usually use just dark. I try to mix colors in it, so that it kind of looks like there is something happening in our palette. And now the foreground building. For this foreground building, they kind of have this amber, warmer color in this European building. So I want to get that as much as possible. I might change it after, because this might not come closer to us, because the colors little bit lighter. That's why I'm trying to mix a little bit of colors here and there, and I'm not trying to add like a lot of details in this foreground building as well. I usually tend to add more details in the foreground, but this one gonna act as a lead-in forest than anything else. So there's also a tree which connects that dark building there, so I'm trying to have some darker pigments there in the trees, and eventually I will change it. Now let's take a brave step and let's add the road and everything. So for this I'm mixing a lot of colors in my palette. I usually go for Sepia and a little bit of white paint in it, or a little bit of Sepia and a little bit of Payne's gray in it. I did flip my watercolor block because I want to put the painting and because I want the darker pigments at the foreground, but as it goes to the distance I want to have a lighter tone. And there's also a building in the foreground, so I left it as it is because that's going to act as a really good lead-in, and it also going to have like a little bit of details in our painting. As you could see, I also left some street crossing as well, and I'm taking the same pigment. I'm also a little bit of adding a little bit of details here and there, and I'm also taking a little bit of white paint here and there because that's going to be acting as a reflection. I take off the paint and I put some colors in it so that it kind of looks like there is something happening on the road reflection as well. And I'll let it dry for a bit, and I'll keep doing this process till I'm happy with it. And before it dries out, I'm going to put a little bit of darker color where the ground meets the road, so that will like bleeds in and it will create this reflection, the building reflecting on the ground. So now I'm going to be introducing a little bit of mid-tone, a darker tone, because in the foreground I want to have that darker tone in my reflections. And I usually like keep on rotating the canvas till I'm happy with the painting. And I also noticed that the foreground dried quite a bit and the valley kind of dried out as well. So I want the whole foreground to come in, and I take this pigment all the way to the distance. Now you could see as soon as we added the darker pigment, the building in the foreground came in the front and the rest went at the back. So now the painting looks for me it looks a little bit odd, but once we start adding the details, adding the lights and everything, the whole painting will come alive. So I added some snow at the top of the building, and the building facing the foreground lacked quite a little bit of value, so I'm adding that as well. And I'm also adding the details on the foreground building, and it has this darker roof, so I want to get that capture that detail as well. So I'll keep building it. So for the darker pigments, for the darker details, I'm using a Payne's gray and French Ultramarine blue, or else you could use a Payne's gray and a little bit of a burnt amber in that darker pigment. As I said, this painting I added quite a lot of details in this painting. Whenever I do a painting, I try to keep my details minimal as possible, but this painting requires a lot of details because there's a lot of buildings and a lot of tiny buildings in there. So now I'm going to add a little bit of a lighter pigment in our painting. So for that I'm using white paint, Chinese white. I'm trying to get the windows and see where the detail sits, and this will dry out really fast because this is just Chinese white. So we are almost at the detailing stage, so now what's remaining is adding lights on our painting, and that will be it. And I went ahead and I added a lot of lights in our buildings, and for the lights I used a cadmium orange and white paint in it, and I used a red cadmium red and a little bit of white paint in it as well. This took quite a lot of time for me to add it, so that's why I skipped that part and I showed you guys. Now I'm taking white paint. I'm showing exactly how I added those lights in my painting as well. So for the white paint, I highly recommend using gouache, because that will bring up a lot of highlights as back. Sometimes I take my white paint and spray it some area, and that will give a little bit of lights here and there and variations with various sizes and stuff. So now it's a matter of squinting your eyes, checking your reference, and adding the details everywhere. And as soon as we added like lights in our painting, the whole painting came alive. And you can also see I also added the reflection as well. And there's like I also added cars here and there. I didn't went crazy with the cars, but the cars also reflecting on the ground, so I'm using a Payne's gray for it, and I made it like reflecting all the way at the bottom. So now we are at a stage that where we have to balancing out things. So what I mean by that is you have to squint your eyes, see that where do you want the values to be darker and where you want the lighter values. So this comes by experience as you paint more. This is most of an artist preference because I don't have any say in it, because every artist thinks differently from one another. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm checking my details. At this point I don't look at the reference. At this point I will check my painting and I will see where I can add details to have a greater impact in my painting. So I want you to sit back and relax and enjoy this process. Thanks again for watching this wintry mood painting tutorial with me. Let me know what you learned from this video and what's your favorite color in this painting. If you have any other questions or subject you want me to cover in watercolors, write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com. I also created a playlist especially for moody painting. If you're interested, please go and take a look at it. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And please do share with your friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.